Okay, today we're going to talk about Vygotsky's learning theory. All right, let's start with the PowerPoint, or the Prezi, excuse me. All right, first slide, what is Vygotsky's theory? Social development theory argues that social interaction precedes development. Consciousness and cognition are the end product of socialization and social behavior. And in focusing in education, primarily it focuses on the zone of proximal development, how it separates what a student can do with a teacher from what a student can be or what a student can do without a teacher. This leads to the notion of scaffolding, which we will talk about in the next slide. For the learning theory, Vygotsky's concept of the zone of proximal development is based on the idea that development is defined both by what a child can do independently and then assisted by an adult, but also it's key to remember that, as not previously mentioned, that a peer can also assist the student. Knowing both levels of Vygotsky's zone is useful for teachers, for these levels indicate where the child is at a given moment, as well as where the child is going. Okay. So this is a diagram about the zone of proximal development. So it's what a student, picturing this as a student speaking, what I can't do, what I can do with help, and what I can do myself. So the zone of proximal development is where between where a student can work with them by themselves and then with help. Ways to incorporate in the classroom, we're going to look primarily on ZPD and scaffolding. So first, use the child's zone of proximal development in teaching. So what's an example of using the child's ZPD in the classroom? An example of this could be a math equation, giving an example on the board using a demonstration so that students at their seat can write it down, follow along, and then do an activity on their own. Teaching should begin with toward the upper zone of the limit where the child is able to reach the goal only through collaboration with the instructor. With adequate continuing instruction and practice, the child organizes and masters the behavioral sequences required to perform the target skill. As the instructor continues, the performance transfers from teacher to child. The teacher gradually reduces the explanations, hints, and demonstrations until the student is able to perform the skill alone. Once the goal is achieved, it may become the foundation of the development of the new ZPD. So scaffolding. Scaffolding is used to help children move to a higher level of skill and knowledge. So you're offering just enough assistance. What's an example of using scaffolding in the classroom? So an example of this could be that students complete a compare and contrast chart as the teacher walks around the room providing support when he or she deems it necessary. Skilled peers as teachers. Children also benefit from support and guidance of more skilled children. Remember that it's not just adults that Vygotsky believed are important in helping children learn important skills. Children also benefit from the support and guidance of more skilled children next to them. So monitoring and encouraging students' private speech. Be aware of the developmental change from externally talking to oneself when problem solving during the preschool years to privately talking to oneself in the early elementary school years. In the elementary school years, encourage children to internalize and self-regulate their talk themselves. What's an example of monitoring private speech in the classroom? So per subject field depends on vocabulary and the type of private speech. For example, within history, you want to use consistent words such as compare and contrast so that students are then using those words in their own head and able to translate that into their work. So assessing the child's ZPD, not their IQ. Vygotsky argued that assessment should focus on determining the skills determining the child's zone of proximal development. The skilled helper presents the child with tasks of varying difficulty to determine the best level at which to begin instruction. The ZPD is a measure of potential learning. So it's important here that the IQ as a measurement of learning potential emphasizes the intelligence is the property of a child. By contrast, the ZPD emphasizes that learning is interpersonal. It is inappropriate to say that a child has a ZPD, rather a child shares a ZPD with a more skilled individual. So what's an example of assessing a child's ZPD in the classroom? So an example of this would be, for example, in history, before you move on to discuss World War I, you assess a student's ZPD in terms of understanding the causes of it and what led up to the World War I. So in the classroom, here's a little example of what you might see in the classroom. Okay guys, today we are going to learn about Venn diagrams and comparing and contrasting. We can use this in the future at the end of the semester when we get to writing comparing and contrasting essays, but let's first start with the Venn diagram. So to begin, we're going to make a shape like this, 2 circles. Okay, so you're going to first start with labeling both sides of what you're contrasting. So right now we're talking about the North and the South during the Civil War. So we're going to begin with writing the North on this side and the South on this side. This is where our similarities will go. All right, so let's begin. On the North, what are some characteristics of the North during the Civil War?
They were economically sound.
Okay.
They were more tolerant of race.
Okay, and what's the other one?
And they had more people.
More people.
Yeah.
Very good. And what are some characteristics of the South?
The South had a huge agriculture boom.
So they had more agriculture in
Yes.
general?
Cotton in particular.
Okay, what's another one?
They also had more armories which produced gunpowder and ammunition.
Okay.
They also focused on the importance of slaves within their plantations and how they incorporated into their work.
So they were more dependent on slaves in the
Yes.
North. Okay, what are some, can we get a similarity, 2 similarities about the North and the South during the Civil War? So what do they both struggle with? What do they prosper? What are some similarities?
One similarity that I found was the army was almost equal in size during the first year.
Interesting, okay. Okay. Is there another example of how they could be similar? Do they have similar struggles sometimes?
Well, yeah, I actually found that they were both extremely rural. Like, there's a common misconception that the North is more industrial than the South, but no one really lived in cities.
Right, exactly. So they were.
South. Yeah, they were both lived in rural areas.
Okay, so they didn't have booming cities, so it's just.
No,
okay.
not yet. No.
So they're both rural. Very good. Okay, so that's a great example of how we just made a Venn diagram comparing and contrasting the North and the South. So now we're going to have you guys individually are going to be able to pick 2 generals, either from the Union or the Confederate Army, and you guys are going to make a Venn diagram just like the one we just made, comparing and contrasting. You can choose Lee and Johnson. You can choose anyone you want. That's just an example, and you're going to write at least 3 similarities and at least 4 characteristics of each. Similarities or differences. All right, and that is all. You guys can begin.